trying to do is to excite someone from absolutely ground zero. As soon as you look at it, the instant you see it, a whole stream of messages have to come over coherently. The fact that it's fast, that it's light, that it's state-of-the-art, that it's super dynamic. All of this stuff has to come across instantaneously.
What are these beasts that streak and burn the stagnant asphalt of the late 20th century? That humble virtually every car and lesser bike? That accelerate from 0 to 60 in less than 2.5 seconds? Top speeds of over 160 miles per hour? They are engineering and design gone to the limit. The men in suits want these bikes off the roads. They're just too fast. Too much fun. Japanese sports bikes bear much closer resemblance to these race bikes than sports cars do to racing cars. The sports motorcycle has always been a magic steed that vanquishes all in its path. Its ancestor is surely the young cad stallion. Note the single saddle, the low tight reins, the gripping knees. Today's designers fight to satisfy a perennial demand, racing performance on the road. That this is now possible is due to one man. Japan was flattened after World War II. The population was starving. City dwellers had to travel to the fields for food. An engineer from Hamamatsu saw an opportunity. He bought 200 war surplus generator engines and attached them to bicycles. They soon sold out. His home village is now swallowed up by the industrial sprawl he instigated. An empire bears his name, Soichiro Honda. This is Honda's 1949 Model D, the Dream. Despite its simple design, it is now a priceless rarity. At a time when other Japanese manufacturers were still offering bicycles with clip-on engines, Honda produced a bike to European standards. His obsession to produce the best motorcycles for the masses drove Japan up the technology ladder. He was a maverick that woke up a conformist society.
We first saw him, and you just said it was the bloke sweeping the floor. A little tearaway, but a good engineer. Lots of stories about him. They loved him. He was a great one for employing young engineers and giving them the opportunity to say, there's a blank sheet of paper. We want a 250 or a 500. This is what we think it's like. Design it.
One of the biggest secrets of Honda's success is the company's force of 30,000 youthful and satisfied workers. A key to their satisfaction is the way they use their time away from the job, with plenty of encouragement and financial support from Honda.
Honda's philosophy, that of linking ease of use for the customer with highest quality engineering and mass production, soon made the company the largest motorcycle producer in Japan. By 1958, Honda's growing range of machines had swamped the domestic market, and he urgently needed a bigger return on his heavy investment. With a Japanese reputation abroad for second-rate products, he knew that only race success would attract global customers. His target was the toughest race in the world, the Isle of Man TT.
The first event of the 43rd Tourist Trophy races is about to begin. Jim Redmond, riding a Honda, number 2, starts off.
The Honda team were laughed at in 1959, but came 6th, 7th, 8th and 11th in the 125 event. In 1960, they were 4th, 5th and 6th in the 250 event. Then at only the third attempt, Honda achieved his goal.
The first 5 places in this event were taken by riders on Honda, an achievement that will go down in the history of the TT races. Halewood, a young man of 21 years age, finally comes into the goal first, 7 1/10 seconds ahead of Taveri.
In 1961, the British industry offered oily, badly made bikes that were unreliable and troublesome. Motorcycle sales were in a slump. the arrival of Honda's small, colourful, well-made bikes revitalised the market.
This is a Honda C92. It's got a 125cc engine. It dates from about 1963. As you can see, it's got a pressed steel frame, pressed steel leading link front forks. It was sold as an advanced ride-to-work bike as a complete package, which obviously included the indicators, decent brakes, enclosed rear chain, and its main feature was that it was very, very reliable and economical to ride.
They were beautifully put together. They're quite different. They had square headlamps and lots of unique features. But generally, the way they were engineered impressed me so much. They ticked over nicely, and there didn't appear to be any oil leaks. We borrowed one and tried it out. We rushed it around Brands Hatch, and it still kept going, and I thought it was good value for money.
But Honda knew he had to get the backing of the cognoscenti, the speed freaks.
This is a Honda CB92. It's a 125 Super Sport, and it was immediately hit the headlines as being by far the fastest 125 road bike that had been around for a long, long time. It brought many features from the racetrack. It's got a twin leading shoe front brake, a very fast twin-cylinder overhead camshaft engine.
The first one I saw and the first one I rode, which the Japanese mechanics had taken to the Isle of Man for personal transport when they came over here on their first trip in 1959. They used this as a runabout, and my eyes lit on it, and I asked them could I borrow it for a few hours, and it was unbelievable. It had a maximum speed, as I soon found out, of about 70 miles an hour, with me sitting upright on it. The brakes on it were incredible. They were better than most racing machines we'd had. The technology was outstanding, the method of manufacture, the castings, their die castings, the quality of finish. These people were very, very serious about engineering. They took concepts, engineering concepts, a mega step forward.
Honda's rise to preeminence mirrored and often led Japanese post-war growth. In a country with no natural resources, survival was dependent on communal effort. People worked hard. Unhindered by a Victorian manufacturing legacy and backed by American war aid, they had the chance to get it right from the start.
First of all, they used scale in a way that had never been seen in the industry before. They used the expansion in the domestic market to build new factories that had innovative techniques at the time. They used transfer lines, automated conveyors for assembly. They used special purpose machinery rather than general purpose machinery. New techniques of casting and forging, all were made possible at very large volumes.
In order to assure the highest level of efficiency and precision, Honda has found it expedient to design and construct many of the machine tools installed in its factories. Much of the machinery used on these engine production lines was made by Honda itself.
Honda in particular made very aggressive investment during the high growth years of the 50s and 60s and took on very large levels of debt. But with that investment, they achieved very low cost positions, very high margins, were able to pay back that debt quickly, and in the end they had higher profitability than the rest of the motorcycle industry in the world. The British industry was much more interested in short-term profitability. The Japanese were investing for longer-term returns and were taking much less dividends at that time.
They were also giving the customer more. Features like push-button electric starting. In the process, they were modernising motorcycling. Faced with such a threat, foreign competitors resorted not to innovation, but to ridicule.
It's a common misconception in the West that the Japanese copy, full stop. The word for learn and the word for copy in Japanese is the same word. If you think of judo or kendo, these are arts that one studies a series of preset models, things that you have to do. You repeat them again and again and again and study them until you can be perfect at them. And only when you have perfected these pre-established prototypes can you then move on to extemporize, to develop. When we saw the Japanese motorcycles of 20-odd years ago that just seemed to be copies, they were. This was during the early booth stages. This was the getting to grips with what the thing was all about. How should you make it? What is a motorcycle? Then we saw the improvement phases. We've been in the dominate phase for quite a long time now.
It's a T20 Super 6, first introduced into this country in 1966. It was claimed to be the first 250cc motorcycle to reach 100 miles per hour. It does have 6 speeds in the gearbox, which enables the engine to make the most of its power. At the time, it knocked the spots off the general British competition, including bikes like the Triumph Bonneville, which it would give a very good run for its money in its day.
By the mid-60s, the other Japanese manufacturers had caught up on Honda's lead. For the big four, Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki and Suzuki, the game was simple. Sell lots of well-made, well-designed bikes. They created some true classics. The losers were the European and American manufacturers. For them, the 1960s was a litany of underinvestment, patronising dismissal of the opposition and lost chances. Too little, too late. The Japanese ran rings round everyone, and soon they would drive a stake through their hearts. These are the first disc brakes seen on a mass-produced motorcycle. They're a symbol of a deep-seated Japanese obsession with constant improvement. In 1969, this bike simply leapfrogged the European industry.
It's a 1969 Honda CB750. The biggest reaction to the 750 Honda was the 4 cylinders and the racing pedigree that went before it. Performance was top speed of about 120, 125 miles an hour, which was very good for the time. People didn't really believe that anybody was ever going to make a 4-cylinder motorcycle. Soichiro Honda proved that it could be done, and done successfully.
The first true superbike, the term was actually coined to describe this motorcycle. There was a paradigm for the future. It was a machine that was closely tolerance engineered. Its crank case was split horizontally, which means it didn't drop oil all over the floor. Things that seem quite obvious to us now as just good basic engineering had been applied.
And it worked. You know, there were no horrible bugs, you know, you didn't have people coming back afterwards saying funny noises or, you know, timing chains breaking or tappets slitting, no oil leaks, that unheard of. It just worked, and, you know, for a 4-cylinder overhead camshaft motorcycle that handled reasonably well and smooth, beautiful, unbelievable.
The CB750's engineering sophistication destroyed foreign competition. Honda's state-of-the-art manufacturing megalith and a decade of racing dominance were overwhelming. The Italian and American industries had to be saved by government. The British fell apart overnight.
It's important to remember that at the time they had production volume of over 2 million units, and the whole British motorcycle industry was only about 20,000 units.
Fierce competition between the big four produced some extraordinary machines.
The bike's a Kawasaki H1. It was built by Kawasaki Heavy Industries, and the main features of the bike is a 500cc 2-stroke 3-cylinder engine. Well, they were built purely to build on Kawasaki's performance image, which was the image they wanted to create specifically for the United States market. Because the bike was built specifically for straight-line performance. The handling is not too good. If they could take on a human form, they'd definitely be in prison for murder.
This is a Suzuki GT750, first produced in 1971. This actually is a 74 model. The first ones had a drum brake. They very shortly brought out the twin disc to compete with the Honda and the Kawasaki. It's a 3-cylinder water-cooled 2-stroke, so therefore it's extremely smooth. The thing is actually called a GT, a Grand Tourer, as opposed to the more sporty models from the other makers. This one is, being a late one, it'll do about 120, 125.
Many of the early 70s bikes were gas-guzzling, smoky 2-strokes. Environmentalists attacked them and won. Kawasaki, like Honda, saw the future in the easy-to-tame 4-cylinder 4-stroke, but they went further. They came up with an all-time classic, the Z1, the king.
The bike started development in 1967, code name the New York Streak. But Honda rather stole its thunder in 1969 when it launched its 754. Kawasaki, realising they had to come back with something bigger and better, and hence they decided on 900cc 4-cylinder engine with double overhead camshafts. It must really have been quite awesome, because even today when you ride it, it's very, very smooth, it's very torquey, and in its day, very fast. It was road tested at over 130 miles an hour. And wherever you go, it creates an enormous amount of interest.
Yet beyond the macho posturing of sports bikes, down the catalogue in the commuter section, lies a 35-year-old bike, the Super Cub.
We look back to when Super Cub first came out, which was 1959, and we see something slightly quaint and old-fashioned. But when it came out, It was the most extraordinary object. It was completely new. It wasn't a scooter, it wasn't a motorcycle, yet it combined the benefits of both.
Well, this was designed really as a motorcycle for a non-motorcyclist. It was very simple. All the working bits were covered up in plastic so that Mr. Average wouldn't know what was going on, so it wouldn't frighten him. And it was a very successful thing. It came into this country in about '62, and it carried on till the present day with this model here. But basically, the concept hasn't changed at all. It's been very, very successful. They've sold millions of them.
Bloke came in and put £20 down, had the balance over a year, sort of £5 a week, and the things just went on and on and on, you know, 20, 30,000 miles. It's unbelievable. 150 the gallon, and they cracked that, you know.
In spite of racing, in spite of flash dash, all the rest of it, they have sold worldwide, and particularly in Southeast Asia, a phenomenal number of cubs, and they're still in production.
The Super Cub and its derivatives are the golden geese of the industry. Designed in 1958, the Super Cub's worldwide sales recently topped 20 million, far outstripping the VW Beetle. With it, Honda has changed the face of motorcycling.
In the early 1960s, they changed radically the perception of the motorcycle from a vehicle used for transport or a cult item for Hell's Angels types, and opened it up to a vast public.
Honda ingeniously chose not to advertise in the motorcycle press, but in magazines like Time and Playboy.
What the Japanese did was they looked to people. They thought to themselves, what do people actually want to buy? Whereas many British manufacturers and European manufacturers were going, what do we want to make?
Customers can now have just about any conceivable form of motorcycle they want. But the fantasy object for the majority is still the same.
A lot of motorcyclists, when they get aboard the machine, they imagine themselves on a racetrack. They see themselves as some sort of protagonist out there, carving their way through the field.
Motorcycle racing is now more popular than ever. It's the shop window that sells the name. Its centrality to the industry will also ensure a constant supply of future classic road machines. And the myth of the motorcyclist as racer come lone warrior rides on. Motorcycling is now big business, a leisure activity for a technological age. Mr. Honda saw to that.